So what we have for today is the news coming right from Blizzard about more changes to patch 10.1.5, which at this point we also know the release date of patch 10.1.5. In case you have missed it, that's the 11th of July. So according to our calendar, the 11th of July is going to be in 3 resets from now is when patch 10.1.5 comes live, and we have more changes. Unfortunately, today most of the changes to the specs are going to be nerfs, so it's not a very happy day for the specs we're gonna go over. So this is what we have for today. The first in line of the changes is to Augmentation Evoker. Now, I'm assuming most of you don't even know what I'm about to tell you for Augmentation because you ain't playing this on the PTR, but just know that these changes are all nerfs. Time Walker granting Shifting Sands to one ally instead of two is a massive nerf, especially in Mythic Plus, where, hitting 2 DPS out of 3 was quite big. Now you're only hitting 1 DPS out of 3. Shifting Sands is the buff, is basically your mastery. Based on your mastery level, you are going to be giving one of your allies a versatility buff, which can grow quite high. It can be even a 20 or a 25% versatility buff, which translates to 20 to 25% more damage. This was going out to 2 allies, now it goes on to only 1 ally. So it's a pretty hefty damage nerf to Augmentation. You also have Prescience, which is the critical strike chance buff you can give to allies, nerfed by a couple of seconds in duration. It's not as bad of a nerf. You have also expectedly the health bonus given by Black Attunement reduced. Previously, the default health bonus was 5% more max HP, now it's down to 4%. And then when you activate your defensive, your Obsidian Scales, which buffs this max increase in HP by upwards of 20% more max HP. So it turns it into a rallying cry for 5 people. Now it's been nerfed down to 16% of your max HP, which is still powerful, but not as powerful as before. So expectedly, ever since its implementation on the PTR, Augmentation has gotten quite a lot, we should say mostly nerfs over time. So we will see what kind of version of Augmentation will hit live servers in a couple of weeks at this point to see how powerful it's going to be despite all of these nerfs. After this, we have a couple of changes to Preservation. I would say they are net neutral in the end. First, you get all of your healing increased by 2%, but in return, you get your Rewind nerfed. Rewind no longer heals for 50% of the damage the players took in the last 5 seconds. Now it heals for 40% of the damage taken in the last 5 seconds. So you have a 2% better healing overall, but you heal less with Rewind, which is an acceptable trade-off. You also get a buff to Exhilarating Burst. It's doubled in effectiveness. Now your critical strikes, instead of healing for 200% more healing, with Exhilarating Burst they used to heal for 215% and 230% more. Now it's doubled. Now they heal for 230 and 260% more. This wasn't a talent that was taken very often, especially both ranks. Usually, at best, you were taking only 1 rank of this talent most of the times. Maybe now with this buff, it will be worth putting both points into this, but I'm not too sure yet. Still, I would say the change is more or less neutral for Preservation Evoker. What is not neutral are the changes to Fire and Frost Mage. So Blizzard is quite simple in the description. After several rounds of updates to both Fire and Frost, each tree has seen a significant boost in power, which in turn has put their overall throughput quite a bit higher than their live counterpart. TLDR, we have to nerf them. That is basically what it is. Fire Mage gets Living Bomb further buffed. Blizzard really wants you in 10.1.5 as a Fire Mage to start using Living Bomb as part of your AoE rotation, but everything else gets nerfed by roughly 10 to 12%, from Pyro, Fireball, Fire Blast, Phoenix Flames, Ignite Damage, Scorch, Flame Strike. Basically everything you can do is nerfed by 10 to 12% as a Fire Mage. Same goes for Frost Mage. You get a little bit of a quality of life buff where Glacial Assault's chance to trigger is increased to 25% instead of 15%, but then Glacial Spike, Ice Lance, Frozen Orb, Blizzard, Comet Storm, Ray of Frost, Flurry, Frostbolt, all nerfed by roughly 12%. So that's the main change happening to mages after the rework, the planned rework to their talent trees and many of their mechanics. Still, the damage apparently after the tuning was a bit too over the top for these two specs, so Blizzard is attempting to put them back in line with this possibly last round of tuning before the patch goes live. We then have changes to Monk. These will be a little bit more dramatic because the changes are few and not that drastic when it comes to Brewmaster. You have a change to Press the Advantage. For those who don't know, Press the Advantage is the talent that has been added as a choice node with Weapons of Order. So now you have the possibility of choosing between constant, extra little damage active at all times with Press the Advantage or single big cooldown with Weapons of Order. This change is essentially trying to make it even between Brewmasters using dual-wielding one-handed weapons or Brewmaster monks using a single two-handed weapon. Specifically, for example, now only triggers from main hand attacks. So it won't matter how many weapons you are using, it will still just proc off of one weapon. What is perhaps a bit more annoying about monks at the moment aren't these changes to Brewmaster, which are kind of mild, it's the fact that we don't see Windwalker. And we don't see Windwalker, while at the same time, scrolling down, we see that in the item changes, we do see that Seal of the Earnest Chosen effects damage has been reduced by 25%. Now, why does this matter for Windwalker Monk? It matters for Windwalker Monk because the two best-in-slot rings for Windwalker were the Onyx Amulet, which has been nerfed by 40% in damage, or is about to be nerfed by 40% in damage, and now the Seal of the Earnest Chosen, which is now getting nerfed by 25% in damage. This means that the best-in-slot items that gave Windwalker a big chunk of their damage are now doing much less, but there is apparently for now no compensation. There is no extra being given to Windwalker for having their strongest rings being nerfed by quite a bit. You might have heard this mentioned multiple times. Windwalker scales terribly with gear, scales terribly with secondary stats. They need borrowed powers, they need Blizzard to bail them out, to give them some extra effects that make them stronger and relevant. This season 1 and into season 2, they were somewhat bailed out by things like the Amulet and bailed out by things like Seal of the Earnest Chosen, something outside of their toolkit, outside of their spells and talents that buffed their damage by quite a bit, but now those things are being nerfed and Windwalker at the moment is left stranded if Blizzard doesn't offer any type of compensation. Now we have Paladin, which is the highlight of 10.1.5 together with Mages because it's one of the specs receiving a rework. One of the big ones is the Merciful Aura's new talent. So if we go to Holy Paladin, right down here where we used to see most of the time just Blessing of Summer as your default choice, now you have Merciful Auras. Your auras restore some health over time to 3 injured allies every 2 seconds. While Aura Mastery is active, all allies within 40 yards are healed by that effect, and the healing is doubled, is increased by 100%. This is very similar to the Aura of Mercy of old that Holy Paladin used to have. It's still good by default to have this because nowadays, you know, when you are in a raid and you have more than 2 Paladins, what do? One Paladin is going to run with Devotion Aura, the other Paladin is going to run with Wrecked Aura. What's the third Paladin going to do? What aura is going to use? So at the very least now you have an option. You have an option to use an extra aura as a Holy Paladin. Of course, there is still the problem that using this aura with Aura Mastery would still deprive you of the Devotion Aura Mastery, which is the 15% damage reduction. Now, considering Discipline Priest is not particularly meta at the moment, Aura Mastery would be basically your only guaranteed way of getting easy to apply damage reduction cooldown in a raid. So it's unlikely that this aura would be the default choice of a Holy Paladin throughout a raid. It's definitely going to be good for them, for example, for padding, for getting high up in the meters when, for example, doing farm or doing certain bosses where Devotion Aura and massive damage reduction is being required for some big hits and there is maybe some more consistent damage to be healed. Maybe this one can work for Holy Paladin, but at the very minimum, it's good that they have a choice now. they have a possible option. The rest of the changes for Paladin are more mild, they are more average. You have Awestruck increasing the critical strike chance of your Holy Shock, Holy Light and Flash of Light by even more, by 20% instead of 15%, which is good because now you have your Awestruck that gives you 20% crit chance to Holy Shock, and then you have your Divine Glimpse, which gives you 8% crit chance to Holy Shock, so now you have a 28% base crit chance on Holy Shock on these talents, and then Holy Shock itself as a base 10% extra critical strike chance. So you can start your build without any stats with 38% more crit chance on your Holy Shock. Most of the other changes are not nearly as important. Mana change on Holy Shock, slightly more healing on Flash of Light and Holy Light. The other one of the bigger changes is changing how Tears Deliverance work. Instead of having a base duration of 10 seconds and the follow-up talent being able to extend the duration of upwards of 50 seconds, now the base duration is 20 and the follow-up talent can extend it all the way up to 40. This is good. This is good because this talent is good, but you might not have wanted to spend this extra talent because it doesn't do much. Before, you were kind of forced to because the base duration of Tears Deliverance was only 10 seconds. Now, with the base duration of Tears Deliverance being 20 seconds, you're not as forced to take this extra talent. So it's a quite decent change, all in all, for Holy Paladin. Finishing off with a good quality of life change of Holy Prism now radiating healing or damage to targets within 30 yards instead of 15. So now you have much wider room of healing and doing damage with this talent, as well as Glimmer of Light healing being nerfed. 400% increase instead of 450%. It's warranted. Glimmer of Light right now is a bit too strong in the PTR for Holy Paladin, so no surprise there. Good news for Priest. Good news for Priest in particular for Discipline, because Discipline for years now used to have the no-brainer of the pick of Power Word Barrier. However, it's clunky, it requires you to stay in the same place, it requires coordination, it's not nearly as useful or nearly as effective in Mythic Plus, for example. Now you have another returning option next to Power Word Barrier, which is Luminous Barrier. Now you create a shield on all allies within 40 yards, and the effect of this talent is increased by 100% when not in a raid. So now you also have a pretty effective way of a pretty good cooldown in Mythic Plus, for example, without having to have your players inside your bubble as usual. The next one is gonna be our worst point for today. Yep, because it's Rogue. Blizzard announced the changes of 10.1.5, saying that they had big plans coming for Mage, for Paladin and for Rogue. We saw Paladin, we saw Mage over time, multiple times, multiple changes, and this is the change for Rogue. All ability damage increased by 9% for Outlaw. Outlaw, Subtlety and Assassination were also users of, for example, the Onyx Amulet that's about to be nerfed by 40%. Blizzard was talking about reworking the specs. It's been weeks, it's been a couple of months, nothing happened. Eventually, I'm assuming we will get a "we are sorry" statement from Blizzard about how they didn't make it in time to come up with any relevant changes for Rogue, so any possible major changes to Rogue are going to be delayed to patch 10.2 or 10.2.0.5 or something like that. But definitely not coming in a couple of weeks in our upcoming patch. The last one is a small but still wanted and welcome change to enhancement. Maelstrom weapon trigger rate increased to 20% instead of 16%. That's the last of the significant changes for patch 10.1.5's hotfix that came out yesterday, more or less. Across all of these, of course, the more standout change is the one to the two mage specs, where Blizzard decided they are kind of doing too much right now. It's time to curb them down a bit, as well as some of the continued nerfs to augmentation. At this point, we're kind of worried to see which version of augmentation will come to hit live servers, just how powerful it's going to be, and then some further decent additions and changes to Holy Paladin, which continues to have a pretty promising set of changes for 10.1.5. But for today, we have done all of the changes for this latest round of tuning for the PTR of 10.1.5. We will see if in the next 19 days before the release of the patch we will get any more tuning from Blizzard to any more of the specs that have been missing from the changes, but for now it's time to leave each other once more. We are thanking, of course, as usual, all of the Patreon supporters, together with everyone else who has been supporting and can keep supporting for free, liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself, for example, are still fine enough ways to support for free. So with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys probably tomorrow, and in the meantime, I was hoping for a bit more chilliness, maybe some clouds in the sky, even as we started summer, but no, we are straight into the scorching sun from the get-go. Great.